Hello, this is Tipping Point Radio, and you're listening to The 42 Show. Today we're going deep in talking fathers and forgiveness. We're looking at what forgiveness really is, how children may see their father's imperfections as their own fault. Is it possible to see the perfection in the pain and hurt, and how to be with what really is? All this and more as three guys pursue the answers to life, the universe, and everything. Okay, it's the 42 Show, and I'm here with Morgan Boatman and Brad Olson. I'm Craig Merriweather, and today we're talking about fathers and forgiveness. And the reason this has come up in my awareness is because I heard a story about Wayne Dyer. Wayne Dyer is the, what would you say, metaphysical author of something like 42 books. And he talks about growing up when his mother came home from the hospital with him, Wayne, little Wayne Dyer, the baby. His father had moved in with another woman in another city, and never met his father. He had two older siblings at the time. I think one was 5, the other was 3 or so. 5-year-old kind of remembers the father, but they never saw the father again. Never sent any child support, never participated in any way, shape, or form. This was in the late 40s. Times were tough, and they were growing up in the Midwest somewhere, and the mom was unable to afford having 3 kids, so she had to put the children in an orphanage. So Wayne Dyer grew up for about the first 7-8 years in an orphanage in different foster homes. She finally was able to get enough money to bring the family back together when he was about 10, but struggled for many years. And so there was a deep-seated hatred for his father that his older brothers, that his mother had, that Wayne had. And in 1974, Wayne Dyer, as a failed author, I believe he was like a high school teacher, he found out where his father was buried. His father was buried down in Tennessee. So he was living in Chicago at the time, makes this huge trip from Chicago to Tennessee. Didn't even realize his father had been dead for 10 years. His father died in 1964 of cirrhosis of the liver, drank himself to death. Never met his father before. He drives all the way, or flies, or however he did it, from Chicago to Tennessee. Not an easy trip. Just literally to piss on this guy's grave. He hated him so badly. Shows up at his grave, vents, and is angry and lets all this stuff out for about 2 hours on his father. Just rips him, yells, screams, gets back in his car, is about to drive off, and he thinks, no, this isn't over yet. He comes back to his father's grave, and he says, you know, you did the best that you could. I forgive you. Leaves. He then releases a book called Erroneous Zones, which I think at this point has sold something like 70 million copies. He's on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. He's on all the talk shows, and he becomes this huge, massive success. His book that came out a couple years ago, I believe 2006, called Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, and it's about his experience with the Tao Te Ching. It was written by Lao Tzu. And here's the dedication to the book. It says, "For my father, Melvin Lyle Dyer, even though I never knew you, after thoroughly digesting the Tao, I finally get it. It is and always was all perfect. I love you." So this is a guy who literally went to his father's grave to piss on his grave. He hated him so bad, and he writes this dedication to him so many years later, after realizing that maybe things happen for a reason. So being fathers and having fathers, I thought it would be an interesting topic to discuss. Where does forgiveness start? Where does it end? And how do you go from that massive hatred, where you're literally going to desecrate somebody's grave because you hate them so bad, to forgiving and loving them?
Well, that's an interesting story.
I also bring it up because I think we all deal with this kind of thing, and maybe not as harsh terms as Wayne Dyer, having to grow up in an orphanage and all that. But I just thought this is something we all deal with, and maybe just not with fathers. Forgiveness is a huge thing.
I think the concept of forgiveness only occurs when a person has a concept of right and wrong. I mean, or good and bad and correct and incorrect. You can't forgive something that just is, and that's where that's the point that Dyer reached. So there's only forgiveness where there's judgment. So ideally...
Well, of course you have to judge the situation, or you don't have to, but we do. This person did wrong by me.
But that's what you're saying. That's where Dyer reached. Right. That's the position that he reached, and that's the position of non-judgment is forgiveness. So if you wander the planet without judgment, then you don't have to forgive.
Hard to do.
Indeed. Virtually impossible.
And it also comes, his statement in his dedication to his father for the book, he says, I finally get it. It is and always was all perfect. So as if this huge, without this tragedy in his life of his father doing the best he could, of course, his father abused as a child. When he started researching the situation, abused as a child, did not have a happy childhood at all. So his father was basically doing the best he could.
We're all doing the best we can. And his phrase, all is perfect, means I see the world without judgment. And if you're not familiar with Taoism, that's basically the main tenet of Taoism. That not things are perfect. I mean, perfect is a judgment too, but things are.
Well, would it be fair to say things happen for a reason? I mean, without
no, that's another perspective. Things don't happen for a reason.
Without this experience, Wayne Dyer would never have written Erroneous Zones and the other literally 40 or 41 books and the programs and the PBS specials and the talks he's given. That would never have occurred.
He wouldn't be the same person, that's true. But he may still have been an author. But at the same time, it's...
Without this...
Why even discuss that? That doesn't exist.
Because without this ability to forgive, you would not have been able to make that leap and that transition at the graveside.
One only moves forward when one can.
Right.
And
it took
lack of forgiveness, or whatever that means, a strong judgment restricts your movement forward or in directions.
Yeah, it took him till his, whatever it was, late 20s and late 30s, but if you constantly have nice people surrounding you, then it's easy to be nice to them and to forgive. But when your training starts to take effect, when those people in your life show up who annoy, frustrate, disappoint, and anger you.
So you're saying challenge.
And challenge you.
And
what you do, and the training that you do, and as you train others. It's like, that's great to run a couple of laps, but it's only when you get into the actual bout and that you understand your training.
First of all, I think terms need to be defined. I'm not exactly sure what forgiveness is. Mm-hmm. The way we talk about forgiveness generally in our culture is, letting somebody else off the hook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's what offends a lot of people.
Yeah, and I don't really think that's what forgiveness is about. It may entail something like telling somebody, all right, this is some way that you've harmed me, and I'm not going to hold you responsible. But that's not the purpose of forgiveness, I think. I think the purpose of forgiveness is so that we ourselves can lay down this burden we've been carrying around.
It's letting ourselves off the hook.
Yeah, exactly. So forgiveness is really about self-forgiveness, and even more so, it's simply about, as Morgan was alluding to earlier, it's about acceptance of one's life exactly the way that it is, which is a difficult thing to do.
Well, the self-forgiveness raises up a lot of issues because I didn't do anything wrong. Or let's just take Wayne.
But you saw the wrong.
Wayne Dyer didn't do anything wrong. But he came home without a father.
But he saw the wrong.
Yeah, no kid ever experiences...
But that was wrong.
No kid ever experiences the behavior of a parent as the parent's fault. I mean, every child personalizes that. Mm-hmm. They're in a particular developmental stage that Freud called a primary narcissism. So that everything that happens in the world is about them. And if they have a shitty parent, that shitty parent is because that kid believes it hasn't been good enough in some fashion or another. That I've done something wrong to create this alienation or this distance or this anger or what have you. And I'll tell you, it's powerful stuff. When I was a cop, I remember one time going to this domestic violence call, and this little kid, he was about 6 years old, and he had cigarette burns and scars on both arms. His father had been putting out his cigarettes on his arms. And as I handcuffed this guy and took him away under arrest, the little kid was hanging onto my leg, crying and screaming, "Please don't take my daddy away." Now, that's how powerful this attachment is, regardless of the efficacy of parenting. And when something happens to disrupt this bond between parents and children, the child generally thinks it's his or her fault. Because of that primary narcissism, because of the way they're oriented to the world, everything is about them. So there has to be some forgiveness for the mistaken assumptions, the mistaken beliefs, the self-judgment and self-punishment that often exists because one believes at some deep unconscious level, I'm responsible for my father's screwed up way of being in the world.
And even worse, even responsible for the way he treats me or treated me.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's just psychotic.
Well, it is.
And especially after a guy dies, you can't even reconcile. So he goes to the graveyard and he's ready to do what he thinks will solve the problem, but only, you see, there's no response. So you see, it has to happen on this side, and he's actually forgiving himself.
But what I find really interesting about Wayne's story specifically is that he had to have that 2-hour cathartic release and venting before he could reach the spot of, okay, now I'm fine with this.
Well, it's an acknowledgement. It's an acknowledgement that this happened and this sucked, as Morgan said, and that acknowledgement has to be there before you have to see it clearly before you can let something go. Otherwise, what are you letting go? What do you It's like you can't see where you are until you move.
When it comes up, you end up you're withholding your feelings, and which men are amazingly great at. And you have this stuck, I don't know, for lack of a better word, energy within your system, and it's not until you release it in some sort of way, hopefully in a safe way, but maybe this is where addictions start happening. When you start...
Plus you've misidentified it. You said, my father is the origin of all this grief, everything screwed up in my life. And we do it with live people too. We do it with our wives and our children. Oh, if I hadn't made this decision, if this person wasn't in my life, and you always bring up addiction. You must be addicted to addiction. That's an answer. That's because it's internal. It kind of goes, all right, well, I have pain, so I'll drink this, and it'll soothe the pain. But you never get that shouting at the grave chance of recognition, of seeing, wow, I'm shouting at this grave, and still nothing has changed, so it must be me. It must not be him anymore.
And that's where the drinking starts.
No, that's where the drinking stops. The drinking happens before you shout at the grave. You just said the story. He became a success after he...
After he forgave and decided to some extent, and I'm sure there was still a huge growth period for him to understand why his father did what he did. But there was a cathartic yelling and screaming. Then he came back and did the forgiveness exercise, however that worked out for him. And I think it was the releasing of the hatred and the anger towards his father.
But they're all part of the process.
And that's really the process of acceptance. Now, I don't recall Lao Tzu ever using the word perfection in the Tao. Do you?
No, there's no. Perfection is irrelevant.
But what Lao Tzu's pointing to is this powerful psychological move of accepting things as they are. not wanting them to be different, not backwards, not forwards, not for all eternity, as Nietzsche says. That's really the movement that Lao Tzu is pointing to in the Tao. And the Tao is very much based on his observations of the natural world, particularly water. And I think the first opening lines, it's a very short book. I mean, if you haven't read it, read it. It's great poetry, my God. But the very first few lines are about waterways, and the Tao moves through the world the way water moves through the world. And water is at one time the most harmless thing, and it's the most powerful thing, because it carves out canyons, and yet, you know, it's gentle and nurturing, and we depend on it. And so Lao Tzu is simply saying, this is what is. Accept what is. And when you put yourself in harmony with what is, then we get back to the idea of the last couple of shows, you'll have a happy, meaningful life when you're able to do that.
It's the idea of perfection that goes to your saying, we deserve this, and are we meant to do this? And these are all judgments of, well, there's a plan. No, things aren't perfect, they just are. And I guess if you broaden the definition of perfect, then they are perfect. Some things suck in their perfection. Some things are perfectly awful.
To our better good?
No, see, now that's where you trip up. To our better nothing. To our
It's
just
this.
because. Yeah.
But I don't want them to suck.
I know you don't.
But you see,
Well,
that move of not
I want
wanting
to change them.
that move of
That's
not
okay.
wanting
I
things to
can change
suck,
the river.
that's
I'll dam the river.
that's a move from living in the world to religion. Because religion is trying to reconcile the suckiness of the world to our experience of it. And we want to be able to sort of be able to transcend the suckiness. And that, it's not possible.
There is no answer to why. Why does my life suck? Because.
So since I'm the resident medievalist, there's a...
And every show needs one.
There was a priest poet in the 16th century, and his name escapes me at the moment. But one of his poems began like this. He says, "Why does the rose bloom? She blooms because she must." There's no why. There just is.
I want my life to be better.
Okay, that's okay too. Because you are part of the is. You're allowed to change stuff. You don't have to just suck it up.
Part of the reason I think that we exist, and ideally our fathers give us a kind of clue to this, but mine didn't. Part of the reason we exist is simply just to see how much we can do. You know, what we're capable of. Not just in terms of creation or construction, or, you know, capable of in the material world, but what are we capable of emotionally, psychologically, you know, cognitively? What are we capable of becoming? That's, I think, the most, you know, reasonable explanation I can come up with is for being human. We have all these gifts. We have this ability of being able to see the world in a reasonably objective way. Why is that? That's
But also
a fascinating question.
An insanely subjective way.
Yeah, insanely subjective.
It's amazing what we're capable of.
But
why would this be developed?
But because we reason, we must have a reason for doing what we do. A rose blooms just because it does. We need better explanation than
You're
that.
saying you're more than a rose?
I am. You think you're not?
I am not.
I think that it's fascinating to understand that process, but there is no science, and I don't believe there ever will be, that can tell you why that rose blooms.
No, but a rose isn't angry at the bunch of roses next door to it for any reason, shape, or form, or it's mother rose or its father rose,
Or
or
its
the
own
bee
thorns.
that came to fertilize and
We don't know.
left without saying
Don't have
goodbye.
rose consciousness. You know?
Because we have reason, and I'm assuming, maybe erroneously, roses don't have reason, but since humans have reason, we must find reason in the things that happen to us.
We
Well,
must.
This is why Lao Tzu uses that natural world as the metaphor.
But we're in the natural world.
But you just said you weren't. You said you have to have some reason beyond, other than the rose.
Well, okay, maybe must, and maybe that's what enlightenment is getting beyond all reason.
I don't really believe in enlightenment.
Well, this is depressing.
Yeah, welcome to Craig's world. Glad you could come.
I think enlightenment is another fantasy that we have in the West about, and it comes from the East, it comes from the Orient, where we sort of fetishize and eroticize everything since the 1700s.
It doesn't come from, it comes from our viewing the Orient.
Yes, yeah, our fantasy of the Orient. And you look at people who are supposedly enlightened, they don't claim to be enlightened.
Is that where you're headed for, Craig? Was that one of your goals?
Enlightenment?
Yeah.
It'd be nice. It's on the bucket list, sure.
What does it mean to you?
Is it ever since about the teenage years, I transitioned from wanting more material things to more spiritual nature because of what was going on in my household. And I think it came from a wanting to be happy. Maybe this is where my obsession with happiness and demanding to be happy comes from. So it's been this long journey. It's like I after about the age of 15, 16, I never had any desire to be something like a carpenter or a CEO or engineer or anything. Didn't interest me at all anymore. I wanted to be happy because I knew I was extremely unhappy. And so there, and a lot of that search in the 20s, I got out of the Christian church and you start experimenting with the Tao Te Ching, or started looking at this Sufis and various Hinduism and all these different things, because maybe they have the answer. These people seem to be happy. And so it was this interesting study of all that new information. And enlightenment was always a goal, although I don't know that I could explain to you what that is. People seem to talk about it a lot in those books that I was reading. And it's something to be achieved, especially they bring up the Buddha.
Well, I think the thing that they're looking to achieve is an escape from the human condition.
But it seems like that is possible according to the literature.
I don't think it is. And I don't think that's what the literature says. I think the literature says that you can suffer less. But I don't think it says that you can escape. And the way that you suffer less is through this process of radically accepting the nature of things.
It's interesting you say radical, because that would imply just a massive undertaking of...
Yeah.
You almost have to say, life is shit, and that's okay.
That's true. And that's,
you got it.
Okay, I don't want...
French existentialism goes halfway. It says life is shit. Oh, well. But you have to make that other move.
I refuse that definition.
No, because what you do now is you have a certain narrative, and you receive the narrative when you're a kid.
Mm-hmm.
This is my life. And then we think that memory and experience all seems to exist like videotape. And it's absolutely factual, and it's unalterable. But the truth is that it's a mythology. The memories we have of our own lives, the stories that we tell of our lives, are mythologies. We're telling myths, the myths of our lives. They're fictional narratives. Now, anybody will tell you that, any lawyer, any judge, any cop will tell you that eyewitness testimony is often the worst thing that you can have, because if 10 people see something happen, you'll get 10 different versions of it. How is that possible? We've got 10 different ideas of what the world is at work, and it gives you a different narrative. And objectivity is very chimerical. It's really hard to come up with. So what you do, ideally, and the beauty of things being fictional, the beauty of your life being fictional, right, is that you can change the meaning of experiences. And so Dyer, and I would argue this is probably what he did, rather than seeing his father as a giant asshole and his very existence was somehow debilitating to Dyer, he changed the narrative. And he said, because I had the father I had, I was challenged in ways that made me grow so I could become who I am now. And without that, I wouldn't be here now. Now, that's changing that fictional narrative. And that's, I would argue, is really what our challenge is to, if the narrative you're working with isn't working, then change it. Because we're completely capable of doing that. And it's not chiseled in stone that you have to live with the received story. That's religion. Religion isn't helpful. Religion is all about saying, here's the received story and you can't deviate from it. I think it's a mess. Let me drone on one more minute. Nietzsche says in The Gay Science, imagine one night a demon steals into your loneliest loneliness. And this demon says to you, your life as you have lived it, you will have to live again innumerable times, with every breath, with every thought, with every utterance, over and over and over and over again. He says, would you not fall to your knees, gnashing your teeth and cursing the demon? Or have you had one moment, one tremendous moment, so that you could say to the demon, you are a god, and I have never heard anything so divine. He said, this act would change you immediately, and it would change you as you are. He says, this willingness to radically accept the circumstances of your life not only redeems you in the present, but it redeems the entire past.
Well, you end up learning the lesson. You receive the training.
Yeah.
And you get to pass. You get to pass over the bridge.
Yeah. Exactly.
And wouldn't that be enlightenment then?
No, this is figuring out what we're capable of. Now I'm over this bridge. There's going to be another one. There's never a place where you stop and say, oh, God, I'm glad I'm done with all that human bullshit because now I can relax. And that's my goal. And frankly, that's most people's goal in the Western world. Not moving on and seeing what they're capable of, but finding some comfortable place so they can just say, all right, I'm going to stop now and I'm done.
To reach perfection.
Yeah, and that's a living death in my estimation.
When we're done with our education here on the planet, then we die. This is the training you get at 20 is not the same training you're going to get at 50 or 60 or 70. Constantly builds.
I guess if you think of it as training, yeah.
What do you think of it as? Just
it is
day-to-day life.
It's just whatever comes over the.
Okay, so then what is meaning and purpose to you in daily life?
What is meaning and purpose?
Yeah, because I think a lot of people ask this question throughout their lives: what is the purpose of my life? What is the meaning of my life? I think we had this argument in the first or second episode. When you get to the end of your life, did I do all right? But you seem to not have that burden. I think because for a lot of us it is a burden. When we're in our 40s, maybe there's midlife crisis.
What I would guess is that when Morgan gets to that place, he's going to be just fine. There's not going to be those questions because he's not asking them now. You see.
But I like questions.
That's good. Questions are fun.
So do I. And I suspect Morgan does too. For me, that's part of the meaning of life, is asking the questions. But the answers aren't necessarily out there. Meaning doesn't exist somewhere out there waiting to be discovered. We have to bring the meaning to our own lives. And we do that by the way we orient ourselves to life, not by the answers that we have.
That's the big one right there.
But
is it people look outside for meaning? They look to others. They look to some thing that defines perfection or correctness or rightness or morality or ethics, instead of saying, I'm seeing through these eyes, and these eyes and this mind are defining the world as it goes. Just as it flows, as I walk through it, I'm creating this world. What we get stuck in is that the world isn't capable of change. We think this glass is always going to be here. I mean, we do it in life. We get a job and we go, okay, now I'm set. I've got this, I just got a great job and now everything's set. But as you get older, you realize, wow, that thing that I thought was going to last for so long didn't. And now, and I didn't get any brownie points for it. I got to start all over again from the beginning. This happens on all levels, not just the levels that we recognize. You have, every day is a new day. We think we have all this history that is pointing us in a direction. And I guess we tend to do that. We tend to follow a trajectory that our life seems to be pushing us in. But we actually have great freedom, great capability of adapting and changing and solving apparent problems in our lives. The world that we've constructed together, that we agree is the human world, doesn't facilitate that, doesn't encourage that. So it takes, what was the word, the extreme or the radical commitments to our own directions, our own fulfillment, to break those bonds. And whether it's reframing a dead father's relationship, or redefining ourselves in our career, or as a family man, or as anything, it is radical. It is uncharted territory, if not for some a historical figure, definitely for us.
So is it possible, if we're coming up with the meaning in our own lives, the purpose in our own lives, is it possible to get it wrong? Or do we just...
It's possible to select or to say that this little tiny sliver of experience is my definition. But you can't live a different life. I mean, you can't live a life that's not yours.
But we had this argument before.
Any corner you turn is your corner.
Where we're arguing that the meaning of my life is to sit in front of my 72-inch big screen TV and watch TV shows all day long, reality TV shows in HD. And I find that that's the meaning of my life.
That's strangely specific, Craig.
It's strangely specific because you were saying you could find happiness in TV, and I said, no, you can't, and we started arguing about,
I think you can.
I can't tell you how to find meaning in your life.
I think you can get it wrong. I do.
See?
I think you can get it wrong. That's why I have a living. Now, it's not that I know what the meaning of people's lives is. I don't even know what the meaning of my life is yet, for sure. But meaning is usually never located in an external experience. It's always, it seems to me, an inner experience. And so if you think you're going to find meaning watching the Kardashians, I think it's unlikely that you'll have a meaningful experience.
Isn't that Star Trek alien? Kardashians?
Now that was specific. Why don't you get on him about it?
Because he's always right and you're always wrong.
There's a good mythology.
Yeah. Church of Brad.
I know why you invited us. Free therapy for Craig.
That's right. I seem to be the only broken one here.
No, we're all broken.
That doesn't help me. You're broken broken too.
Who was it said that? I think it was Roca. He said something like, God enters us through our wounds.
Yeah. Wounded, that's where the light comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, being broken isn't a bad thing. But again, this is the idea in our culture. Again, an example from the East is, I saw a beautiful picture the other day of this vase that was uncovered in some archaeological dig. And it had apparently been broken during the owner's lifetime, some, thousands and thousands of years ago. And it was repaired by using molten gold to glue the pieces together.
Wow.
Now, to me, that's the metaphor. It's not to avoid the breakage.
Or to hide the breakage.
Yeah. But it's how do you make the broken pieces of ourselves art? How do you make it beautiful?
Yeah, see, this is what I love about Wayne Dyer and his work. I kind of have this go back and forth with him because sometimes I don't get his deal, but he has literally put his life out onto the world stage as, I don't know, you could say it's narcissistic, or maybe he's just using himself as an example, but he does not hide the fact that he's had troubles in his marriage and with his kids and with his health. He just, a few years ago, went through leukemia and different things. And you think, oh, well, here's this enlightened being. He wrote Erroneous Zones in, 76 or 77, 40 other books on the spiritual nature, and at the end of his life, he gets leukemia, or his wife leaves him, or whatever. But he always comes back and says, this is what I learned. He puts it in a book and makes a few bucks off it, but, And I appreciate that about his deal,
Mm-hmm.
in that he doesn't hide the blemishes and the wounds in his life. He says, hey, last year, this is what happened to me. This is how I felt, and here's how I dealt with it.
All the prophets have, their trials and tribulations.
Yeah.
You don't want to hear about, beg your pardon,
What the hell is that?
Fight Club, man.
Activated his lightsaber.
Are we going to go now? Come on now.
Talk to you later.
God. Shows the importance of this show. Just took off to answer his cell phone. All right. Now let's not get down to business now that he's gone.
All right. So now that he's left the room, we can talk about Morgan.
What is his deal? Just is. Bunch of bullshit.
Wednesday is going to be...
So maybe we should somehow bring this back around to fathers and forgiveness. Because I think this is one of the things that fathers don't often have a clue about. Right? And even fathers that do, how well is it communicated, and do we want to receive it? I mean, because there's this, it seems to me, a habit that we have of sort of wanting to reject whatever our parents say at some point in our lives.
Well, what I find interesting about this whole fathers and forgiveness, because I've been going through a lot of that myself the last few years, and I think this is getting old. 46, 44, whatever, 40, still dealing with this. And I get to a point where it's like I want to be done with the forgiveness aspect. It seemed like 2 hours for Wayne Dyer, it seems like 4 or 5 years for me. And maybe it's because my father's still alive, but it also goes back into being a father myself and thinking, I don't want to be doing this to my kid. And I'm very hyper aware of when I've done something that in my head is going to cause a couple of years of therapy.
We screw up our kids all the time.
Yeah.
I mean,
And I think, okay, here's the relationship I have with my father. I don't want that with my son. Oops, I just did this thing.
But you're already doing way better than...
Yeah, I do, but it's just like, and when you were off in the other room, I was just saying, I still have issues with my father. And it's like, I'm tired of it.
It's unavoidable.
I want to be done with this. And he's the person that he is. And we became this family for God knows why. who set that situation up. But it didn't work, and now we're four people who don't really care for each other or like each other, and we still kind of have to do that family thing because we're family, but it's like, this is uncomfortable, and I'm tired of it.
Yeah.
And still at 46, and 40 to 46, still like, how do I deal with this and be done with it? So I want to move on. I want to get over the bridge and onto my next mountain to climb.
Do you really want to, though?
Yeah, I'm tired of it. It's the same. It's watching the same TV show. There's TV again.
But
Watching the same Kardashian show over and over again.
No, not really though, because this is part of the next mountain. And so there's this point where we go, okay, so this is my father, and that's just who he is. That doesn't end anything. Now you have to deal, again, you have to make that internal move, and you have to deal with your own pain whenever it arises. And that's not easy to mop up. And we go through the living of our lives, and this pain arises, so we have to deal with that pain. And we go, there's that pain. And so I have to experience it rather than externalize it somehow or project it somehow or whatever. And then it'll go away, and you'll live your life for a while, and then that pain will come back up, and you go, God damn it, there it is again. And then you have to deal with that. And it is always a part of us. And if we properly understand that emotional pain, we can get away from the idea that we shouldn't have it. Because that's crazy.
I think Craig wants to take a pill and have it just disappear, though.
No, I don't expect it to disappear. I look at the people who, the so-called enlightened people. I'll even throw Wayne Dyer in there just because of his 40 years of studying and meditation and whatnot. And I still see that life doesn't go well. I even look at Jesus before, and I'm not even talking about the crucifixion, but even before he got to that point, people are yelling at him. People are throwing him out of town.
That's how you wanted enlightenment. That sounds good.
And same with the Buddha. He was getting crap when he moved to a new town to teach, and people, giving him stuff. And I'm sure there were days when his feet hurt and he was hungry or something. But you look at even Jesus in the 40 days out in the desert. He was being tempted the whole time. He's being trained.
Well, what are you getting at? I don't get it.
That
enlightenment sucks.
No.
Yeah, it does.
That you can't get away from the challenge.
Yes, exactly. That's why he's here. He gets it.
I said the same thing. But you want enlightenment?
Sure, I'll take enlightenment.
Guess what?
No.
Guess what?
You are.
Fine.
Well, how are the challenges going to change if you're enlightened?
I'll be able to move through them, hopefully, with a little bit. But okay, here's the thing.
Give me a call. I'll crucifix you when you.
I'm at a point. Okay, this goes back to forgiveness and fathers. I'm at a point where it's like, okay, I'm ready to move on, and yet it doesn't seem to happen that way. So what am I missing?
Because you're not ready.
It's like you're somebody's dangling the metal and say, okay, you're just almost there, and just keeps moving it back. And it's like, I want to be done with this training exercise and move on to something new and different.
You're funny, Craig. I love it.
What is this not?
No, I think what we miss is a sense of humor and irony about it. That we take it way too serious.
Oh no, I find it really funny. And I'm still dealing with this 20 years later.
I
know you find it funny.
It's hilarious to me.
That's just one of those things, I think. We... In this culture, I think that generally we think in terms of perfection. I don't think we...
Craig thinks he shouldn't have to suffer anymore. He shouldn't, because he suffered too much. He's through with it. He's paying his dues, right? With the father thing? That's basically what you think. You go,
I don't think suffering will end, but I'd like the suffering to be different.
Somebody
Change the
tell
channel.
me that I'm done with this.
Yeah, there. Exactly. Done with this. I'll move on to a different channel, a different story, a different book.
You didn't hear the rest of it. Somebody tell me.
More.
Yeah, somebody tell me. You're waiting for a judgment from on high saying, all right, I've I took the test. I'm close enough. I got a C. That's average. I should be able to learn new material now, right? That's what you feel.
Yeah. Okay.
That's stupid.
Well, the way you put it, yeah. You put it like that.
Sounds bad when you say it.
Well, okay. So who do you think the big teacher is?
That's a trick question, isn't it? He's trying to entrap me in some way.
You know the answer to it.
I'm not going to do that.
You're already trapped, dude.
Why doesn't my cell phone ring at appropriate times?
All right, here's the thing. Everybody has troubles with their father, right? So I had, my share of troubles with my father. 10 years ago, we've been we've been interacting a little bit. He was up in Idaho and we lived here. He told me, I'm on hard times, I need a place to live. So I invited him to my home. We had an extra room. We actually have a little sort of apartment downstairs. And he came to live with us. This was a big move, someone basically inviting someone that you don't really like a whole lot into your life. The 8 years that he lived with us healed all wounds and all the grief and all the any troubles that we had. We were two grown men facing each other as friends now.
Did he end up moving out, or did he pass away there?
Well, we'll get to that. A couple of years after he moved in, my mom calls me. They've been divorced for 20, 30 years. I'm on hard times. I need a place to live.
Jesus God. Talk about a comedy.
Swear. Jesus. All right. There was another room that she could live in. I don't have a big house.
No.
So for probably 4 years, here's my parents living with us. All right. I'm a father with one daughter. And suddenly she's got two grandparents living in her house with her.
And I'm assuming their relationship together, your mother and father's relationship, was not healthy.
See, he assumes this. That was the most healing thing
at
for
first,
all of us.
No, that must have been very
immediately.
Really?
It's a different kind of family. We recognize.
I have a feeling that's a real understatement.
We recognize we came together out of necessity, but I mean, why does anything come together? We worked together. There was friction, but here's my long alienated parents. They hadn't spoken to each other for 30 years, and now they come together as friends. Mm-hmm. They all started training at the studio where I train martial arts, and we did stuff together, and it was kind of a miracle. Mm-hmm. Then Mom got a job, so she moved out. She was able to get back on her feet, and a few years later, my dad passed away right there while I was holding his hand. Mm-hmm. And this was an incredible experience. And even watching my father pass away, I wouldn't give that up. That might be the moment that one of the moments that I would be willing to relive my life for. Mm-hmm. Because of the complete surrender to what I believe in, which is to use Dyer's phrasing, that everything's perfect. It may suck, it may rip your heart out, but it's there.
Now, is it perfect are you saying it's all perfect because you gained something from it, you learned from that experience and grew as a person?
Because I was present. Mm-hmm. Because I was willing to be the rose and not try to be anything else.
To just have the experience.
And it was if I was able to gain anything from it, it was the knowledge that I was able to provide my father with the best years of his life, living with his family. And that passing was, well, it was the inevitable, culmination of that. We were all going to have that moment. And hopefully it will be as beautiful as that moment.
You see, I think that's an amazing story, and it fills me with some hope about my relationship with my father. But on the other hand, if he was to pass away tomorrow for whatever reason, I've often, not often, a couple of times when I've discussed this with Christina, my wife, talked about this kind of stuff, and I said, how would my life be different if he was all of a sudden just gone tomorrow or today? If I get a phone call today that says, hey, your father was in an accident and passed away. I said, okay, well, how does that make my life any different? It doesn't, because I don't have a relationship with him. You see what I'm saying?
So it will make your life different.
Maybe. I mean, it will make my life different in that I'll start I wish it would have been like this, I should have done that kind of thing. But there's only so many times I feel you can reach out and not so much get rebuffed, but have it go nowhere before you think, okay, well, maybe it's time to move on. If you're asking someone out on a date, after about the 8th and 9th time they say no, it's like, well, maybe I'm getting a message here that they don't want.
You don't have to reconcile your life with others. You have to reconcile it with yourself.
There you go. That's. I think that's exactly right. I think that's the big one.
Who else is in charge?
You don't need to continue to work at that relationship.
And yet there's still a longing of, and I'm sure Dyer and all, other people in a similar situation, that, why is it that even Wayne Dyer, that just blows my mind, he never even met the guy. Maybe he talked to him on the phone once or something, but never met the guy, and yet he still had this attachment to him in some way, that he has to go across the country.
That's the mythology that Brad was talking about. Somebody told him that Dad did this to you.
This is one of the things that I like about Jungian psychology is that there's this idea even called archetypes you borrow from Plato.
Yeah.
And so you can never experience something physically, and yet you still know what it's like because of the archetypal nature of, for instance, fatherhood. That you can miss something that you never had.
Mm.
And it's an extraordinary thing when you think about it. But that's also one of the things that connects us to other human beings and our ancestors and all those human beings who have come before us for the last, however long human beings have been on the planet. Is that a million years or something?
Yeah.
So you can miss something that you've never had. And that's a hard thing sometimes for people to wrap their minds around. Why am I missing something that I never had? Mm-hmm. Well, because you do have it in some sense. You have an understanding of it. That archetype is a present reality. Understanding that, I think, is helpful. Because what you're missing is a human experience, not so much that particular individual.
Mm-hmm. But it also, my relationship with my father informs and moves in certain directions my relationship with my son.
Exactly.
Almost to the point of...
You think it does, because you said it does.
And your relationship to your father helps sort of fill out even farther that archetype of fatherhood as you understand it. So not only do you have the whole history of fatherhood wrapped up in that archetype, you've got your own experience that's wrapped up in that archetype as well.
And you're making fatherhood.
Exactly. And it's sort of like you're living that archetype forward.
Yeah.
Because now your son, when he becomes, a 46-year-old father, is going to be adding to that archetype as well. And it's quite beautiful, I think. I think it's quite lovely.
That's your why. If you need a why.
But we don't, do we?
Some weaker souls do.
Doesn't the why inform the meaning and the purpose?
No. The meaning that we come up with provides the why. And we get to a point often where, all right, this meaning doesn't do the job anymore. We had a plumber at the house not too long ago, and we had to replace the garbage disposal. And so afterwards, and he had an apprentice with him, so he was teaching him how to do this. And afterwards, the plumber was sort of like lovingly, sensuously caressing the pipes under the sink. And it took me a moment to realize what he was doing. And this is, I think, the same responsibility we all have in terms of our own understanding of ourselves in the world. But he was trying to falsify his work, right? He was trying to disprove the hypothesis. He was checking for leaks.
Right.
And we have to do that with our own thinking. We have to check for leaks. That's our job. And
the meaning of a 22-year-old is not going to be the same as the meaning of a 42-year-old as a 62-year-old.
Exactly.
All right. So just drop it.
Drop what? Your dad thing?
No, everything. Yeah. Oh, yes. Okay. Is that how best deal with it? Well, I don't mean drop it as such a.
No, you deal with what is.
He's not carrying it. Who's carrying it?
All you have to do is deal with your own pain about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not...
But I'm tired of dealing with the pain about it. That's why I was trying to,
That's why it doesn't ever seem to go away. We have to be willing to fully embrace whatever that emotional experience is whenever it arises. Otherwise, it keeps coming up because it's not adequately, processed or
I processed it.
What do you get from it then?
I don't know. I think it's just a longing of I wish this was like that. So I hear relationships with your father and think that sounds pretty cool. Must have been difficult, to have elderly parents in your house for that long period. I mean, I'm not in hard times. Can I come live with you for?
He wasn't elderly. He died at 63.
Oh, is he?
My relationship.
But it was like, again, it just probably wasn't the easiest of times, especially at the beginning. Maybe you grew into it.
Life takes energy, yeah.
Yeah. And, but it sounded in the end, it was a wonderful experience, hopefully for all involved, at least for you. And it'd be nice, yeah, I would love to have that kind of relationship with my father. Maybe that's why I'm going maybe overboard with my son, or maybe that's just being a regular dad. But, and again, that relationship with my father informs, and
I don't think you go overboard with your son. But yeah, our relationships with our fathers do inform the way that we parent. I don't want my daughter to feel about me the way I feel about my parents.
And yet we can't help that.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to find something.
Of course they will. I mean,
I don't want that.
Her mom's a clinical psychologist and I'm a psychoanalyst. We're not saving for college. We're saving for therapy. But the thing is, you see, and I'm not alienated from my folks. It's just they're two of the most fearful people I've ever met in my life.
Yeah.
And that's not how I live. It's not how I understand the world. And that's never going to change. And do I find myself wishing it were different? Yeah, I do, frequently. And it comes up. And I realize that's my desire, and I have to deal with that longing the same way I deal with all the other longings that I have that aren't realizable, at least in this moment. And whenever something is not attainable, it causes pain. And you have to deal with that pain, or at least I do. And then it goes away, and then I can live until it comes up again.
Well, it ends up being a grief issue.
Yes.
It's like, I'm longing for this to have been that way. And it's to be like this now, and it's not. Therefore, I grieve what is not here, therefore missing everything that is in front of me.
That's right. And the process of grief actually allows you to discover that what you think is missing from the world, that those things that you're grieving the loss of, are not really gone, that they actually exist in you.
Did you ever want something for Christmas or for your birthday and you didn't get it?
Hell yeah.
And you made it through that.
I made it through, but life would have been happier if I...
Would it have been?
I don't know.
So
TV.
there's a life beyond you, beyond Craig and Dad having some friction, right?
Yeah.
So if you no longer want that present, the desire for it disappears.
So my pain is coming from the fact that I still want the relationship?
Sure. And that's normal. That's understandable, right?
Yeah.
It's nothing to... See, the thing that we do with this, and this may be part of what's happening, we do this little move where we think that because we feel pain, that we're doing something wrong. It's not an indication of anything being wrong. It's just what human beings do.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to not think about it as something's wrong. Oh, I feel pain, something's wrong. What's wrong with me? Nothing's wrong with you because you feel pain. Something's right with you because you do. If you didn't, you'd be a sociopath.
Yeah. Yeah. But it goes back to, maybe my vision of enlightenment is not having to feel the pain anymore.
Exactly.
Or the emptiness.
And that's what I'm saying. I think most people think enlightenment is somehow magically being taken out of this experience of being a human being. That's so uncomfortable and hard to understand.
Yeah, also being crucified.
But I'm done with the wounds. I want them sealed up in gold now.
Well, do it then.
That doesn't make the wounds go away. It just makes them beautiful.
Well, I'm fine with that.
Because the wounds are still there and they're still visible.
Next week,
what?
When we get together, I want this resolved.
You've had enough of this crap?
Let's move on.
Your
next week, your mother problems.
No, next week we're just going to talk about our favorite Beatle or something. We can each take one. You can be John, you can be Paul, I'll be Ringo.
Oh, Beatle, like human being Beatle.
What do you think?
I thought you were talking about insects and bugs.
I
used to have a Beatle.
Somehow that's not surprising to me.
You used to have a Beatle? Like as a pet?
Oh, that too, but I was talking about a car.
Oh.
Come on, keep up, man.
Alright.
So what are you going to do about your dad?
I don't know.
I'm going to call you Rose.
I'm going to ignore it.
No, don't ignore it. I'm going to call you Dad. I'm going to call you Dad. I'm going to call you Rose. You got to be the Rose. Be the Rose for a week. Be the Rose for a week.
All right.
Ching, 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 ching.
All right, well, okay. What am I supposed to do about it? You two? I don't even know what that means, be the Rose. So I'll talk to you, Brad.
No, I talked to Morgan about it. It's his idea.
Like the phrase. It's a beautiful phrase. Why does the rose...
Yeah, and I read some funny bumper stickers, but they're meaningless to me.
Okay.
Be the Rose. I don't understand that.
Okay, that's good.
Oh, God, it's one of these.
So if you just simply looked at this... If you just simply looked at this struggle with yourself, actually, about your father, because it's not a struggle between you and your father, it's a struggle with yourself. If you just looked at that as something that, well, this is simply what must be expressed right now, or whenever it comes up. Because, I mean, it's not like you're living this 24 hours a day, right?
No.
So,
in fact, it just kind of came up because I heard Wayne Dyer talk about his deal, and I thought, oh, that's an interesting subject.
And that's what happens. The more we deal with this stuff, the less often it arises. But when it does, we have to give our attention to it. And somehow for some reason that feels like a regression or something, and it's really not. It's just simply what you must do.
Well, it's not so much a regression, but I'm still here.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
You're disappointed.
But-
you
but-
think you should progress. I'm looking forward to that crucifixion. I better put some effort toward forgiving my father.
But it's not like you're still here. It's not like you're stuck there. These big issues in our lives, at every new developmental stage that we encounter, we have to deal with these big issues again. It's sort of like a spiral, you know. We're not being stuck. We're at a new level, but yeah, those core issues are going to be there. We have to deal with them.
well, sure, because he's still in my life, and
Yeah,
things really haven't changed. So now I got to deal with it at a different place in my life.
yeah.
Every week I do a lot of push-ups, and they still suck. But I still do them.
Yeah, push-ups suck.
Have you done a push-up before, Craig?
I did them with you at that go-ruck thing. Push-ups in the snow and the mud. And
Sit-ups suck for me.
Oh, sit-ups. I don't do
Push-ups I'm
sit-ups.
okay with. Sit-ups suck.
See?
But then why do
still
you
do
do
them.
them?
But we do them.
Because they're awesome.
Because it's good for us.
There are other ways to have things be good for you than doing push-ups.
I had a football coach
You
say
could
to
be
me that
doing
doing
weight
makes the
machine.
grass grow.
I like that.
All right, push-ups is a next week's subject. If you don't like it, why do you do them?
I didn't say I didn't like them. I said they suck.
Oh, God. Okay.
Do you only do things that don't suck in your life?
It's called delayed gratification.
Why? So you look at himself in the mirror and say, I'm awesome?
No, so you can feel
So you can go to Fight Club?
so he can feel strong and healthy and good.
But can't you do that in other ways besides doing push-ups?
I think I think there's some degree of fitness required to actually feel good and be able
No,
to
I understand
enjoy
that,
life.
but can he work on the machines at the gym? Or
But why when you can do that
because he doesn't like them.
in that way? Well,
They suck.
he's not going to like the machines.
I don't know, maybe he will like the machines. We were arguing about you. You're just sitting there.
Hey, I never said I didn't like them. That's an important distinction.
It is true that things can suck and we can still like them.
Besides push-ups, give me the example.
Pain.
No, I don't like the pain. No. Done.
Oh. Well, back to my story. My father died right in front of me. That sucked. That was awful.
Mhm.
But it's not like my desire for it not to have happened was going to change it or prevent it. So
Jung used to
I'm
say
okay
that
with it.
Jung used to say that everything contains its own opposite. So in pain there's joy. In joy there's pain. And that's what we look for. We have to go below the surface of the experience, because what it's presenting us is not just one thing. There's all kinds of stuff in the experience. And the more we can understand that, and the more we can deeply move into the experience with some kind of awareness, then we discover everything else that it's offering us too. It's not just miserable. It's not just suckiness. It's there's something else there as well. The opposite is there as well.
I realized the other day that being there for my father's death was just like being there for my daughter's birth. It was the same raw experience. And both changed my life. Both represented my willingness to change, to go to flow with change, and both just tore me to pieces. And I think we can face life every day like that. Every day is a birth and a death of those around us and of ourselves and of our ideas, of our expectations in life, of our relationships. There's really no other way. You have to be there. You have to show up. If you don't, well then, what are you here for? Why do you bother got to rip open your heart every day. It's the only thing. That's why that's what humanity is. That's what being a human being is.
Can't say better than that.
All right, then. Next week I'm going to talk about Beatles the rock group. Marty's going to talk about Beatles the car. Brad's going to talk about Beatles the bug.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll have...
Boy, there's an area of expertise.
Well, you can do some research.
Switch.
And we'll switch.
All right.
Is that it for today?
Hey, you're the boss.
Okay. All right.
As always, gentlemen, it was a pleasure.
Be the rose, Meriwether.
I still don't know what that means.
Watch Caddyshack and you'll get it.
There you go.
Be the ball.
Who hasn't ever played golf and not gone?
I know.
When they're trying to hit it into.